All right, so let's talk about addiction. Now, what is the definition of addiction? If some of you want to know, from my research, addiction basically means the repetitive habit of consuming something even if it is bad for you. Cambridge defined Cambridge defines it as an inability to stop doing or using something even if it is harmful. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very big issue that needs to be talked about. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the right amount of time to produce this video. And I have produced it after I have released my vlog because I did actually shoot a video. I did actually attempt to shoot the video for this one, but the scripture was just not proper, and the way I was talking and all that stuff, I didn't feel like it was suitable enough to talk about this topic, and I just felt like I could do a better job so I could provide better content regarding things like these for you guys. So, a statistic that I have seen that is very, very prevalent in the internet that talks about addiction. The United States have released a statistic stating that 1 in every 10 adult is exposed to some certain kind of addiction. And from what I remember, 70 or 75% of them recall that they have not received the proper treatment for it. Listen, man, I'm telling you, this is a very big problem, right? And it might seem like duh, of course it is, but to emphasize more, you could basically say that you get a group of 10 people and one of them could have a severe addiction that could damage their lives permanently, or the lives of the people around them, or both. So, how can how can somebody end up in this situation? You may ask, how could somebody end up as one of the 10 young adults who ends up being in an addiction that makes them end up either causing major self-harm, suicide, premature death that comes directly from the substance or the abuse of the substance, and other problems like broken relationships, divorces, broken families, and many other examples. Crime, people can do crime from addiction. Addiction can lead to crime and many other, major disasters that could happen to a person's life. So we can bring it into this example, all right? Basically, imagine a teenager who is 15 years old, okay? And that teenager has a lot of problems. That teenager has a lot of problems either at school or at home or both. And, we're just gonna use the majority example, which is problems at home, because usually the problems at home are the ones that affect us the most long-term or maybe even permanently. And we would say that that teenager would have a very bad performance at school, or he goes to school getting bullied, he's picked on, and nobody likes him, everybody hates him, the kids there, teenagers, they're naive, they're rude, okay, and he is all the way below in the ecosystem, and he's having, or she is having, a very rough time. So that could be just school, but school is only like the tip of the iceberg. Usually the biggest problems stem from home, right? The biggest criminals, the worst people in mankind are not really born the worst people. They're just taught how to become this way. They were taught from their parents or taught from their close ones, and It all comes from the home, man. It all comes from the home. So, you know, let's say that one teenager has a very bad day or has a very bad day just in general, like they usually, this is something repetitive. They always have bad days, but the problem is they go back home and they either go back to emotionally neglecting parents, absent parents, you know, they might be busy at work, or abusive parents, or a divorced parent, meaning they go home to only one parent, or no parents at all. They could be orphans. So we can properly say that this teenager is having a very tough time. He has a lot on his shoulder and he has a lot to cope with. But where does it all start from? Where does the addiction part start from? Where is the beginning of the story? The beginning of the story is when that poor teenager is not taught how to cope properly. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to deal with their problems. I mean, most of us don't know how to deal with our problems. We just had to experiment, fuck around, and see what works best for us. And if we're lucky, we would be provided with the right knowledge to cope with our problems in a healthy manner that will not damage our health and not damage the people around us. That teenager is also unlucky. They don't know how to cope. So they would pass by a friend in their class or in their school in an empty park, and they would see them doing some suspicious things. But you know, the teenager, since he's young or she is young, she is intrigued or she is curious, and she's willing to take the risk. And boom, right then and there, they ask for whatever substance they're taking, they ask for it, and they feel this great amount of euphoria. It is something that they have never experienced in their lives. And this is an unnatural amount of pleasure that comes into their blood, that comes into their brain, and they get overwhelmed by it. But it felt good. You know, it felt good to get rid of their problems for a few seconds, calm down, you know, feel the chemicals rush in their blood and make them feel calm, make them feel good, or make them feel energetic, you know, and just give them a temporary boost of instant gratification. And this is not to say, come and tell you, no, instant gratification or delayed gratification. No, this is for a later segment of this video, but they would feel a great amount of instant gratification and it makes them feel good. They have never felt like this ever in their lives. So they would do it again. They would come to that friend, they would tell them, give me some of that stuff, and they would do it again and again and again, and it becomes a habit. And a habit of something bad is gonna become uncontrollable, that becomes an addiction. So let's say we fast forward into that teenager's life and we say that they are in their first year of university, second year of university. They're either freshmen or sophomores, and they are having a very rough time, right? They chose some mediocre college, or maybe they're lucky they got into a very good university. But of course, since the circumstances of that teenager are not that good, they took a university student loan and they're not performing in school at all. They're not performing in university. Their GPA is very low. Their grades are bad. It's the same situation they were in, but even worse. Why? Because that adult now has the freedom to do whatever he likes. And you know, adult life is where you are more liberated. You have more options to do whatever you want. And of course, that teenager unfortunately chose the wrong decisions, and they would go to parties, they would try more things, and it becomes accumulated. Later on, you know, that adult becomes messed up. They keep repeating years, and they cannot develop relationships at all, not just romantic but platonic. They cannot even develop good friendships. So it's just a downhill spiral into an inevitable bad ending. That person either ends up committing suicide, that person may have heart failure, kidney failure, liver failure, or any physiological or physical damage that could completely terminate them. So the problem with this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the idea of all this story, all right? The problem with this is that it's an endless loop. And this endless loop, as I have written here on my notes, all right, is in 4 steps as I recall. This loop starts like this. Young adults or minors use substance to cope because they don't know that it's bad or good, and they develop a habit of using substance every time they cope with stress. Every time they struggle, they would use substance instead of coping properly. And then changes in the brain, neurological changes, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys actually go and look at an x-ray and compare a normal brain to the brain of somebody who's addicted severely, you will see changes in the naked eye. Subhanallah. And the 4th step, which is the last step, detrimental cause and effect, which leads to addiction, affecting personal problems, which leads back to number 1. So basically, in number 4, I think I've written it improperly, but the addictions would lead to the person having problems. Like, problems directly come from the addictions. But we said in number 1, that the minor or the adult uses substance to cope with their problems. But their coping mechanism has led to problems. But yet they still think that this is the right way to cope, so they go back to the coping mechanism, which leads to problems, which goes back to the coping mechanism, which leads to problems. You see the cycle that's happening over here? So another thing that I wanted to mention is not everybody can be addicted, which may give hope to all of you watching. And there are 4 different categories that determine somebody's addictive vulnerability. And we're gonna start with the first one, which is genetics. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it can be in your DNA, it can be in your genes. You can inherit addictive vulnerability. That does not mean you're addicted automatically, but I'm saying that you, person A, and person B, could try the same substance, but addictive vulnerability means that there is a greater likelihood that you will get addicted, more likely than the other person, which is person B. And as we said, there are 4 different categories that determine this addictive vulnerability, and the first one is genetics. And as we said, it can be inherited from your parents. And if you want to make a very clear observation, very easy observation, a little experiment to see that if you have inherited, you could inherit an addictive vulnerability, then you should go look at the habits of your parents or your family members. If they are addicted, if they have some kind of substance that they use or abuse, and their habits just in general, their lifestyle, observe their lifestyle. If their lifestyles are good, then you're gonna end up in a good place, inshallah. If not, then unfortunately you are out of luck. And the second one would be the environments. Now, we can observe this in 2 ways. The first one is the common prevalent one, is that like if you're around people who smoke a lot, if you're around people who drink a lot, whether that's your family or your friends, then there is a good chance that you could end up doing the same habit. And the other one, which nobody really pays attention to, is your environment could not have any unhealthy habits, but your relationship between them is unhealthy. Now look, for example, you could have addiction from a spouse, but that spouse doesn't necessarily mean they have to be addicted to. It doesn't mean that you got the habit directly from them. It doesn't mean you got the habit because they did the habit. It's because things between you and your spouse are not so good. You have an unstable relationship, unstable marriage, unstable family situation, and that leads you to coping with substance or anything that is detrimental to your health. Number 3, ladies and gentlemen, is development. And we're going to focus on a specific part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. When you are a minor, when you are not a fully grown adult, or even an adult in the average age of 25 years old, your prefrontal cortex has not yet to be developed. And the purpose of the prefrontal cortex, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, has 3 purposes, as far as I know. First of all is responsiveness, decisiveness, and emotional stability. Now, if you look back at my video, I said that teenagers are more likely to be naive, they are more likely to be risk takers, they are more curious, and they are less emotionally stable. And all these factors from the prefrontal cortex, if they are not to be settled, they are not to be fully developed, they could lead to addiction. And it makes sense. Like, for example, decisiveness. A minor who is not decisive enough is not decisive enough to know whether a substance is bad or good for him. And reasoning could also lead... Damn, I actually wrote reasoning. Reasoning could also be a possible reason for somebody getting into an addiction, especially a teenager. And then emotional stability, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody, and I mean nobody, like 99.9% of addicts have never, ever started an addiction out of pure logic. Most addictions, as far as I know, always start from an emotional impulse. It is always due to an emotional reason. I feel better when I smoke. I feel better. I feel more calm when I smoke marijuana. I feel more energetic when I take coke. I feel more focused when I take Adderalls. It's all feelings, emotions. It's an emotional reason, not a logical reason. Never a logical reason. So, a side note for all of you, do not judge addicts. You should know their story, and you will never know for a fact how they felt in that situation when they started their addiction. Because nobody would ever start an addiction for a logical reason. It doesn't make sense. Now, I'm gonna get to my 4th point, which is how addiction changes the brain structure. Now, this is something that I really want you guys to pay attention to, because it's very important that you know the neurological, the scientific literature of addiction, so you could see the logical side of it, so you could really see at a raw image how addictions affect you. But before we get into effects and changes, we need to know what is changing. What part of our brain is changing? And we're going to talk about the reward pathway of your brain, which is developed in evolutionary times. Back when we were cavemen and our only purpose in life was to survive in the wilderness, the reward pathway was developed for you to seek food, pursue mates, to reproduce, and to pursue survival. And every time you do any of these things, a neurotransmitter named dopamine, some of you may be familiar with that word, is produced to encourage you to repeat the activity when the time calls for it. It's also produced when good things occur in our lives, whether that's a compliment at work, or maybe when your mom comes and picks you up from school early. You see, these are very natural rewards. These are very natural rewards that our brain has developed enough to take in a healthy manner and does not affect your health at all. So if you do these normal activities, it's actually a healthy amount of dopamine. And you should always aim for a healthy amount of dopamine for emotional, physical, and mental well-being. But what happens if you go overboard? This is where we talk about how substance affects the brain. And we're gonna talk about painkillers and alcohol as an example for this. Painkillers and alcohol can suppress neurons in the central nervous system, and this can result in a tranquil feeling of peace and relaxation, which also leads to a dopamine boost. But the thing is, this dopamine boost is completely unnatural. When substance is abused, the brain is overwhelmed with unnatural levels of dopamine reaching up to 10 times higher than a normal reward. And this is not just any reward. This could be a big reward. This could be good grades. This could be a good body that you have worked hard for years. Or this could be any big accomplishment that you've done throughout your life. Imagine that big reward. Imagine it 10 times higher. Don't you think that your brain is gonna get overwhelmed? When you experience an unnatural level of dopamine boosting, that is called overstimulation, which is very, very self-explanatory. If these habits increase, the brain tries to adapt to these unnatural levels by decreasing dopamine receptors and lowering your threshold. Basically, imagine your dopamine levels, your dopamine neurotransmitter, all right, the threshold as ocean levels, all right? And let's say there is a building right next to it. And then sometimes waves come and go, rewards come and go. We'll say these waves are like rewards, all right? These rewards are like waves. When the waves come, they crash into the building, but they never flood the building. And let's say that this building has no roof, all right? And every time you experience a reward, the water of the wave, all right, will not come over the building and will not flood the building because it's a normal level of waves. But let's say an unnatural level of waves, a very extraordinary level of waves comes and crashes into the building. And this wave is so high, it can be higher than the building that has no roof. So what happens is that this wave comes into the building and floods the building. So what happens in your brain? We're talking about an analogical in an analogical perspective. What happens is the entire ocean level comes down. The entire ocean level comes down. So normal waves will not crash into your building like they used to before. But at the same time, the big waves that have happened, these unnatural waves, they only crash at the building, but they don't flood it anymore. They don't overflow it. But if we really want to go back to the real form of what this really is, when your brain is lowering the levels of the dopamine threshold, that is called desensitization. And when you get desensitized, ladies and gentlemen, your dopamine levels go down. But this is how addiction is correlated to depression. Because you see, the scientific meaning of depression is basically lower levels of dopamine. So when you get addicted and desensitized, then your dopamine levels are going to go low, which could also lead to depression. The most important part, the juicy part of this video is basically, what is the cure to addiction? What is the prevention? Now look, I know it's gonna sound really bad, but I'll have to give you the honest truth. It depends. Everybody is different. Everybody's background is different. Everybody's story is different. Everybody's way of, living life is different. So the cure is very, very, very subjective. It is not really easy to find a solid solution for everybody. But this is what has worked with me, because I have been addicted for a while. In my past, probably 7 years, I've had an addiction. I won't say it due to personal reasons, but I've suffered with an addiction of mine since 10 years old, and I have gotten rid of it from this solution that I'm gonna suggest to you. And it has worked with so many people, and I think it is the best solution, right? And that is self-improvement, ladies and gentlemen. Self-improvement. Trust me, trust me, trust me. If you work on yourself for the next 6 months and you tackle these problems, first of all, you're gonna have a reason to live, because these addictive substances, they don't really give you a reason to live, man. They're just a distraction, but they're not actual pleasure that you have earned. It's just cheap, instant. It's nothing. The only way you could deal with your problems is through self-improvement. And why is it self-improvement, ladies and gentlemen? Why? Is it because it's part of my channel and I'm gonna try to advocate it to market to you? My channel or some kind of idea? No. But self-development is the exact opposite of instant gratification. It's delayed gratification, long-term gratification. It's where you put an amount of effort for a certain amount of time, usually it's a long amount of time, and you reap the rewards after your effort. So basically, if you are getting the rewards of the present, that's because of the efforts of your past. It's not like instant gratification. You consume something, boom, reward. But no, self-improvement focuses on delayed long-term gratification. It's like a tree, right? You don't grow plants overnight. You don't grow muscles overnight. You don't become successful overnight. It doesn't come overnight. Overnight success, if it ever happened to you, it came from years upon years of hard work. It is long efforts with zero return on investment until that one night everything just pops off. And this also comes as an example to my channel, you know. I remember in my high school, I used to have boys and girls in my class, you know, they were all over the social media place. You know, they were all over the social media, you know, market, and they were doing nice videos, they were doing nice montages. These guys in my class, these girls in my class, you know, when they used to go on Instagram and, you know, market their business, market themselves, try to film videos of their lifestyle, try to, you know, do little mini vlogs or vlogs, start YouTube channels, start brand new Instagram accounts to market something that they want to sell. Dude, I used to see them pop off. Like, I used to put so much effort into my videos. I would get like 10, 20 likes in Instagram, by the way. And they would upload just one video. Dude, their comments are like a full receipt of grocery stores from that your mom gets. And they would get so many comments, dude, 15, 20, 30. Dude, it would reach up to 70 comments, my guy. You know, they would pop off, especially the girls in my class, they would pop off. They would do the simplest thing and they would pop off. But guess what? That doesn't work with content, through pure content creation. Because they got the instant gratification, they lost the discipline. So another thing that, you know, self-improvement teaches you is discipline and resilience. Because sure, you might not get the best body, you might not get the best financial status or physical status or mental status, but you develop. It's called self-improvement for a reason. You as a person, you develop. Your work capacity develops. Your ability to handle pain or suffering develops. Your patience develops. Your ability to work under stress develops because you have developed your character. You know what I mean? Imagine yourself as a video game character and you just developed your character, man. And now you're playing better. You know what I mean? That's how the game is played in self-development. So not only does it give you a reason to wake up every single day in the morning, that you have goals to chase, you have a video to make, you have push day, pull day, or maybe chest and triceps today at the gym. You gotta hit the gym today, you know? You gotta study today. You gotta meditate today. You gotta pray today. You gotta keep up your salah in check. You gotta keep your religious health in check. Alright? This stuff actually gives you a reason to live, because it also teaches you, which gets me to my third point. It also teaches you that you are in control of your life. Whether your life goes bad or good is all up to you, which gives you this feeling of authority. That's the benefit of self-development. You know, there are other sources of solutions. A lot of people discuss this. They go cold turkey, where they just cut off that addiction, and they cut off anything that relates to that addiction, whether that's friends, places, anything. Alright? That tends them to that addiction, and they do that for 30 days. First 2 weeks, they would feel like garbage. But then, later on, they would get used to it, and their dopamine levels get back to normal. This is discussed by Andrew Huberman, and he featured a professional in this field. I don't know her name exactly, but I will put her in the description of the YouTube down below. But yeah, man, you either have self-development or cold turkey, but there are so many other solutions. If you guys want me to make another video about it, I would love to do that. You guys are more than welcome to give your suggestions down below in the comments. But other than that, I'm done for today's video. Thank you guys for watching, and God bless you all. Peace.